Good morning. My name is Brandon Perkins. I'm a Symantec engineer with ITS Partners. Um, Today we're going to be talking a little bit about migrating Windows XP to Windows 7, Windows 8 using the Symantec Client Management Suite. Really, we're going to be focusing more on planning out the process than actually demo of doing everything. Why we're really here, and excuse the upper corner, this is not about us. This is actually about Microsoft, right? So we're here to talk a little bit about Windows XP and Office 2003 coming up on its end of life, as well as support end of life. And that really means that there's going to be no more security updates, no more patches, and if you want additional support, you're kind of out of luck. April 14th is that magic date when we're all going to have to move to this. So if you haven't completely migrated to Windows 7 or Windows 8, then you're a little around 7 months from being there. What we've seen in enterprise deployments is that it takes approximately a year and a half to 3 years for a successful migration from the start to finish, the business case through the full deployment, getting all those endpoints migrated over. So 7 months is going to be tricky. Not to say that you can't do it. You absolutely can do it. It's just going to take a lot of planning. If you haven't started that, that's going to be the major portion, as you'll see in this presentation, is the planning and preparation points of this migration. So the way that Symantec has this laid out, especially with the tools that Symantec has, is 4 stages really. Our assessment stage, where we want to gather reports and inventory. We can do that if you're already on the Symantec Client Management Platform or Suite. Then there is built-in reporting and inventory gathering that your endpoint should be already pulling. And you can create reports based off of that information that you're inventorying and report on that to see where you are in your environment in terms of what operating system, what patch level you're on, what service packs, what software is on those machines, what type of hardware are you running, etc. So you want to gather that information so that you know what's in the environment and know what you have to proceed with migrating. The preparation point, you're really your longest, in my opinion, your longest point in the process, where you're pulling all your resources together, you're getting your teams together, you're creating the process, you're communicating with your end users as well as your management. So a lot of organization to go into the preparation stage. Your actual migration, we have different types of migrations that you can do. You can do, a mass migration where you're migrating everybody kind of at one time, or your batch migrations where you're kind of moving people in sections, by department or by model or some criteria that you're basing it off of. And then your last point is going to be the management process. After you migrate these machines, what are you doing for ongoing management? So we'll look at kind of all of these aspects throughout this webinar. So the first stage is the assessment stage. Really, what should I be assessing? So the first thing that you want to look at is your pain points, right? You want to see, okay, how is this going to affect people? What are the decisions that need to be made? And how is this going to affect the overall environment? Remember, one thing that I was always taught, working with endpoint management and desktop administration, is that the end users are our customers. So we don't really want to leave them in the dark or leave them in the dust, as I said. You're going to have things that need to be migrated, not just the applications themselves. What about your browser favorites, your printers, your network drives? What about their pictures and MP3s? You may not be actually migrating these personal items such as pictures and MP3s, but at least there needs to be a plan in there to communicate with your end users on how that will actually be migrated. Also, your C-level, your CIO, CFO, they need information. When do we absolutely have to migrate? hopefully that's already been communicated. April 14th is going to be that stop date for Windows XP, so we need to get this done kind of quickly. And hopefully that was a little while ago. But if you're in the point right now where you're saying, hey, we've still got 100% of our environment or 99% of our environment that's on Windows XP, things need to be put in motion so that you can get this assessment and planning done. C-level also is going to want to know, well, how much is this going to cost us? There's going to be hardware replacements and upgrades that have to be made, and also time, right? We want to make sure that our end users are not having productivity issues because their system is being imaged right now and they don't have access to it, or we already migrated their system but they're missing stuff. They don't have the applications that they need to be successful and productive. And then also your internal IT concerns. How am I gonna migrate our remote users? Maybe they're on a VPN some of the time. Maybe we have external facing servers, so none of our environment is requires VPN for them to come in. How are we going to reach those users and get them migrated? Like I said, time. How long are we gonna have to do this? Are we gonna have to work long days? Are we gonna have to work weekends? What is the potential time that's going to have to be put into this by your IT staff? Our biggest thing to assess, right, is our hardware. The machines that are existing, that are out there, that the users are using. How prepared are we to migrate these machines? Are they running the appropriate amount of RAM? If we're going to run heavy applications, maybe you need 4 more gigs of RAM. So you're going to be needing to run maybe a 64-bit operating system of Windows 7 or Windows 8. Those are things that need to be determined during this assessment phase. And the way that we can determine those is, we can use our inventory solution and IT analytics to report on those hardware configurations. We can see what CPU, RAM, and disk is currently out there. What do we need to upgrade? What do we need to replace? Also, just a brief mention, if you're running IT analytics, or if you're not and you're getting ready to, or maybe it's an idea that you want to, there is a canned Windows 7 readiness dashboard that kind of gives you a good overview of what your endpoints currently look at and how prepared they are to be upgraded. As much as we love to upgrade hardware, we got to check out our software too. What OS and service pack are we currently on? That may make a difference between some of your applications. If we're running Service Pack 3 for XP, maybe there's a little bit more compatibility on some of the applications that you'll be running with Windows 7 or Windows 8. But we also need to verify, what applications are compatible with Windows 7 and Windows 8. What applications are the users actually using? That's a big one. Why are we going to migrate this software if users aren't even launching them? So application metering is an excellent product that's built into the Client Management Suite. Use that with your inventory solution to find out how often are these applications launching. Are they launching at all? And when was the last time they were launched? If a user hasn't used an application in 6 months, it's usually a good bet that they probably don't need that application. So we can reharvest those licenses and verify that, number one, we're in compliance, and number two, that those applications are being deployed to the proper people. Also, with the software, we need to verify what kind of data is on these endpoints. Are the endpoints storing their data locally, or are we having users write this data to maybe a network share? Where's our critical data? Because that's going to be a huge factor in how we're migrating these machines. What data we need to preserve off of these machines in the migration process. Infrastructure also. We need to make sure that we have any infrastructure upgrades completed, number one, if you're in the process of doing so. And also the traffic during the migration periods. Maybe it's going to be a better idea to migrate these endpoints at night whenever traffic is a little bit less. Maybe unthrottled traffic at night, just to make sure that we reduce any bottlenecks, that you don't have your end users, again, your productivity being downgraded at that point based on limited traffic or slower traffic. Because I guarantee you, I know in environments that I've been in, if there's any network traffic issues, either your end users will notify you that they're having speed issues, or your network team will notify you that you're using too much. So after we've assessed everything, how do we what do we do with this information? How do we use it to prepare ourselves? Well, first we need to find out who our decision makers are. And remember that communication is key with everything in this migration process. We need to know who those decision makers are. We need to know what information they need. They're going to need information on what kind of hardware we're going to need to upgrade, what licenses we need to purchase. All financial information that your C-level and your management team is going to want to know in order to make this successful. Also, I put in there, just review positive impacts that the migration will make with productivity. Maybe there's some enhancements or standardization that you guys will be making during this migration process as kind of a refresh period that will benefit the organization in the long term. Always keeping positive impacts are kind of a shining light to your management team, so that they know that this is a good move. Your execution team, that's going to be your IT level people. Who are they? What are their roles? You want to make sure that you have clearly defined roles in your execution strategy. That this person is going to maybe create the images. This person is going to roll out the images. Replace the hardware. Clearly defining who's doing what will give a little more clarity, especially to the management team, on who people need to contact in case something goes wrong. Not that anybody's going to be thrown under the bus, but rather than going through multiple levels of people, he said, she said, this person was doing this, one definitive person to go to for each maybe division will help reduce stress on things that go wrong. Most importantly, in my opinion, take that with a grain of salt. Your end users, again, they're your customers. You want to make sure that you're communicating with them, informing them on what they can expect during and after the migration process. What is their downtime going to be? When are they going to be scheduled to be migrated? What are they going to lose after the migration, if anything? What do they need to be back? What do they need to back up themselves? What will be backed up for them in the process? So again, communication is just key in this preparation stage, making sure that you kind of stage this correctly with your entire organization on we're migrating, this is how we're doing it, and this is what you can do to help us. More communication, clearly defining what your objectives are in this migration process. What are we doing? Okay, we're migrating. What are we migrating? How are we going to migrate this information? How long is it going to take? Assuming that you're using the Symantec Client Management Suite, we'll be imaging with deployment solution. We'll be using PC transplant to migrate data and personalities, user personalities, and software management to redeliver these software packages out to the endpoints. How long is it going to take? Well, support ends in 7 months. So, I'm not at all saying, do this in 7 months and rush it, because you want to make sure that that you get this done appropriately. But maybe ideas like engaging a Symantec partner or an endpoint management partner, consulting firm, ITS. Hey, product placement right here, right? That's what we do. That's what our expertise is in. So engaging in a endpoint management partner, whether it be Symantec or SCCM, can help reduce the strain on the planning process. Endpoint management consultants, we do this on a daily basis. We've done many of them, and in terms of ITS, us as a whole, we have over 200 years of experience overall, between all of our engineers that have done this. So we've seen successes, we've seen failures. We know what points to touch on. So just an idea in that portion with this 7-month period that it's going to take to migrate may be a good idea. Setting achievable goals. We want to make sure that our goals are obviously clearly defined, but also that we can achieve them, right? So if our migration is going to take, we've estimated, I don't know, 7 months. Maybe 8 months is a good buffer to say, okay, we can make sure that we have this, this estimated amount of time. If you're going to promise too little time, you're going to have, you go over that time, you're going to be seen as, or the project's going to be seen as a failure. You didn't meet that criteria. So always setting achievable goals in this sense is going to help make that project successful. Also, stay focused on the project. Obviously, you want to avoid scope creep with other projects that are going on. Now, a lot of desktop teams that I've worked with are pretty strained in the amount of people that they have, so they're working on multiple projects at one time. Something goes wrong, you get pulled off. Obviously, everybody knows that that affects the timeline of a project. Along with this, setting those achievable goals in that buffer of time, make sure that you allocate some of that in there. But most importantly, we don't want to take on new requests right away as we're rolling through this migration. You don't want to. Well, let me give you an example. Let's say that you have a new piece of software that was just purchased. It's got to go out. People are pressuring you to get it out. But it hasn't been fully vetted with this new Windows 7 image that you're creating. So that's going to take time and testing. That's going to take away from this project. Let's keep going with the current version of the software that we're on. Let's get this migration process completed, and then let's look at replacing this newly purchased software. Especially if it's complex software that has multiple pieces that need to be installed in a particular manner, or that need to run with other software that may need to be upgraded. All of this can be done after the migration, and I mean, it's just something to keep in mind. Now, there are going to be those times, that's understandable, where your C-level will say, no, we need this done. But just remember the effects of pushing the migration project off. It's gonna creep into your project time, and that could it could not work out well. During our preparation, we also want to look at other things, maybe some opportunities for change. Standardization. It's a great time during a migration process to determine that we need to make some standardization changes. The biggest one that we see moving from XP to Windows 7 is going to be admin rights. Do we want to have admin rights assigned to these users on this new platform? What's been our struggle in the past with having admin rights? What vulnerabilities has it caused? What extraneous software do we have installed that may be not licensed under your organization that you could get dinged for in the future during software audits? There are ways around the admin rights. A third-party tool that Symantec works with is called Aurelia Application Control Solution, and that can be used to control what applications need to have elevated rights within the operating system without giving full admin rights to the users. So there are solutions that you can work around in creating the standardization process, and admin rights is one of the biggest ones. Also, software. What software do we have out there that's duplicated? Maybe we're using WinZip on these machines, and we're using 7-zip on these machines. What standardization can we do to maybe make all of the images the same, and have our software all standardized across the board. That will help reduce management of the software itself, confusion on what software that we need to push out, as well as licensing on we have X amount of Office licenses, but we have more endpoints that need Office, and we have licensing. Where can we pull those licenses out? Kind of reevaluate where they need to go, and how many we need to purchase. Again, inventory solution is a great way to harvest this information, as well as asset management. If you're using asset management and have your software licenses already in place, then that's a great tool to leverage in order to view a lot of this information. If not, if you're not using asset management, inventory solution can still be a great way to see what software is out there. In terms of license management, maybe you'll want to consult a Symantec specialist to find out how you can get asset management installed, as well as the best practices around the process of asset management and license management. Also change in terms of architecture, more around policy and procedure, but your patch management process. Are we going to be continuing with WSUS, or are we going to be using Symantec's patch management solution, or another third-party patch management solution? How are we going to go about that with Windows 7? It's a good place to kind of start fresh. And get your procedures correctly planned out and processed for the after the migration, post-migration. Conflicting software products. This kind of goes along with standardization, but we really want to focus on how are we installing these products. Maybe we have multiple products that require multiple versions of Java. Well, we may need to virtualize those applications. So we can do so with Symantec's workspace virtualization. Installing those layers to the endpoints rather than having to mess with complex software, multiple complex software that's being delivered to the endpoints themselves. So great opportunity for making changes in your environment. I'm not talking huge changes like, hey, let's rip out everything and start fresh. But standardization is a great place to begin, especially like I said with admin rights, as that's the biggest example that we've seen. In the preparation phase, we're also going to look at how are we going to be imaging? Are we going to use a hardware independent image? That's absolutely what we would recommend. Consolidating your multiple images into one or two standard hardware independent images. Creating the OS image with its base settings that are required across the board. Again, you see that word in there, standardization. You want to make sure that it's best to make sure that we have a standard configuration across the board, that's gonna really reduce the security gaps and vulnerabilities that are across the images. Maybe you have a group, maybe the accounting group that has their own image is having more trouble with viruses or some kind of security creeping on that side, where you can use a standard image to kind of just get a clean slate across the board, making sure that all of your users have the same GPOs or settings, just to make sure that troubleshooting is a little bit more convenient whenever things go wrong. Also, you'll want to go ahead and include any relevant applications that are across the board. Again, maybe we're using 7-zip across the board. If you are, or Adobe Reader, let's use that. That's a better example. Adobe Reader, Java. If you're using those across the board, go ahead and get those into your image. It's going to reduce time in the entire imaging process. But let's not go overboard. Let's not get multiple versions all across the board too. That's why we want to standardize this image into kind of one common image. And lastly, with the imaging, really is your drivers. You want to gather all your drivers that you need. You can use Deploy Anywhere, which is our driver database for deployment solution that will inject drivers post-imaging. So for those hardware-independent images, we don't have to worry about which drivers that we actually need. If we can get the drivers for the models into this database, then post-imaging we should have a complete image that's been laid down and has the drivers injected. So single image, or just a couple images rather than 15 or 20 images will help reduce the strain on having to create as many images as well. Maybe quarterly changes are all that's going to be needed, but creating 1 or 2 images is going to be much less of a strain than creating those 20 on a regular basis. Just something to keep in mind. How are we going to migrate applications? Well, first of all, we need to determine what is our application support. Is our application fully compatible with Windows 7 or Windows 8 if you're going to make the jump to that? If not, what do we need to remediate? How do we need to remediate it? Do we want to repackage the MSIs? Do we want to find new MSIs from the vendor that will have compatibility with these versions of the OS? Do we want to virtualize these legacy applications? I mean, that's always an option with Symantec's workspace virtualization, is making sure that we have these legacy applications ready to go. The application migration order. What are our most critical applications that we need to migrate? What are the first ones? What are the applications that are being used that make our users productive? Let's go ahead and get those migrated over first. That way, if there's any applications that maybe are on the line to be cut, that we're not using as much anymore, then we can go ahead and kind of put those to the side and deploy those later if necessary. Application combinations. This kind of goes back to the support as well. But if we have compatibility issues with other applications, let's say we need multiple Java applications installed for multiple applications, let's just wrap those up into workspace virtualization layers and deliver those to the endpoints. That way we can specify exactly which applications need to use which version of Java, reducing our compatibility issues as well as our the troubleshooting that's needed to determine why endpoints are not working correctly. One of the last things with the preparation is how are we gonna preserve our user settings and their data? Are we going to migrate our user settings? Are they stored in a location where maybe we don't need to migrate them because we're redirecting their drives to another location? What exactly are we migrating in terms of user profiles? What application settings, what custom application settings need to be migrated, and how can we do that? If you're in the Symantec world using deployment solution, we can use PC transplant to create the user personalities and copy their user settings to a storage location, which in turn, after the imaging process, we can place right back down on the endpoints. Again, this is just really to help automate the process. Previously, we have or I have copied user profiles, but it takes time, and whenever you're doing a migration and trying to get something out in X amount of time, all the time is critical. So PC transplant is a great tool for us to copy those user profiles, as well as the data that we need off of the machines. So like I said, essentially what we're doing is we're creating a personality file for the user settings and data. We'll move it to a safe file location, like a network attached storage, or somewhere on the maybe even the Altair server. And after the image is laid down, then we can restore that personality to the endpoints. I don't want to say your less lengthy time frame is going to be your migration, because that's not at all true. But you know, how are we going to do this? What is our approach going to be? With 7 months, are we going to do a mass migration? You can. That's going to be your quickest option, but it's also going to be the most costly option. You know, you're having to determine what replacements you need at this exact moment, purchase those and get those in, or what upgrades need to be done. The mass migration is going to be highly manageable, but very expensive, and you know, you're going to have a lot of resources that are going to be worked pretty hard in a short amount of time. The batch migration, gradual migrations are what we've seen the most of. As you know, especially in combination. You know, let's get a batch migration going so that we can do department by department, or you know, certain criteria, maybe certain applications need to be upgraded. So you're going to do a batch of those users first. Maybe all users that are getting new computers are going to be migrated, so you're going to do a gradual migration. A combination of the two, like I said, is what we've seen most of. The batch migration is not quite as costly as the gradual the mass migration, but it's going to take you know, a good amount of time. Gradual migration, you're going to replace endpoints as soon as they need to be replaced. You know, maybe an endpoint dies, so you're going to replace it with a new machine. You'll move that user to the new OS. That's going to take a lot of time. So batch migration is typically what we're seeing as of right now with the XP to 7 migrations. You know, first doing some testing with you know, some risk-free migrations between the IT department. You know, selecting some users to get upgraded. That way, there's no rush at that point to make sure that everybody is done at the same time. But we can make sure that everything is done correctly with a risk-free migration. We can make sure that we have fail-safes in place to keep the users productive, and we can even build workflows during this risk-free migration time to determine, to automate this process with the migration. If you're not familiar with workflow is our automation product that we can build out and automate the process entirely, even actually going as far as allowing users to use a self-service portal to choose their scheduled migration time, and then during that scheduled migration time, once the user selects what time that they want to be migrated, then that can kick off a workflow automation project to actually run the migration touch-free. Also, we want to determine what backups that we're going to take with the migrations. You know, this is important. You know, rather than going wild west with the migration, what data do we need to back up if should something go wrong? Do we need to take a hot image of the endpoint to make sure that we have something to roll back to if this migration goes wrong with this user? What are we going to do to reduce their downtime? Excuse me. Also, running a pilot migration after this risk-free migration. You know, going out to different departments, maybe migrating a couple people at a time, just to make sure that their applications, as well as their user personalities, are migrated correctly. That way, we're not running into multiple issues across the board when running through the migration and having to kind of react rather than be proactive about mitigating issues. The last real piece with the migration approach is again with the workflow, we kind of want to automate the migration process. The more automation that we can apply, although the more complexity that we apply to it, but the more users we can potentially migrate, and if we get the process down correctly during this automation phase, then we can we can have a fairly consistent migration process with those automation settings. The last real stage of any migration is management of these endpoints after the migration. What am I going to manage? What am I going to manage it with? These are all key points in a strategic migration process. Well, if you're using the Symantec Client Management Suite, what can you manage? Well, we can manage software delivery and patch management to these endpoints. Again, standardization is going to be key. Are we going to use WSUS or patch management? Patch management will give you the capability of not just doing Windows patches and controlling their reboots, but also third-party patching for those endpoints long term. Probably one of the biggest keys with the ongoing endpoint management is really the reporting aspect. How many endpoints have we migrated? What problems have we encountered during the migration? What is our overall migration status? These are all questions that management as well as C-level is going to be posing. So using a good endpoint management product with good reporting is going to allow you to have those answers for those questions. Again, hitting on reporting, I'm going to tie in patch management here. What is our missing patches? What patches are we currently missing? What do we need to remediate? What service pack level did we just deploy after we deployed Windows 7? Are we on SP1? What patches do we have after that? Also, remote control, PC Anywhere, a great remote tool, as well as real-time system manager, where you can view diagnostics on the actual endpoints after they've been migrated. So just a recap, four big migration phases. The preparation phase, where you want to gather your information for your migration. What do we have out there? What endpoints do we need to upgrade? What do we need to replace? What opportunities do we have to make changes in the environment, to standardize admin rights, software licensing, patching, etc. We have our I'm sorry, that was our assessment phase. Our preparation phase, viewing those opportunities, communicating with our end users and our C-level, just to make sure that everything is where it needs to be before we run the migration process, as well as creating our images and migrating or verifying the applications that we need to migrate, as well as the user data and their settings. Our migration stage, where we're going to actually migrate the endpoints over to the new OS, whether it be Windows 7 or Windows 8. What approach are we going to take? Are we going to do a mass migration or batch migration, or are we going to gradually upgrade these machines as they need new hardware? Our typical refresh schedule. Different phases within that are risk-free migrations, making sure that we have fail-safes in place to make sure that we keep our end users productive. Our pilot migrations, making sure we can test our process to make sure that it's successful, as well as giving us a better time frame and proper communication that we need to get out to the end users and C-level. And then our automation process, just to make sure that we can automate the migration process itself, between capturing the user data and personality, deploying the image, installing the applications that are needed afterwards, and then restoring the end user's personality or user settings. And then the management phase, which really is going to be key in the ongoing management. It's kind of a fresh start for these endpoints, right? So we want to make sure that at this point that we're patching correctly, that we're delivering software correctly. And whenever I say correctly, using best practices, how are we importing the software into the environment? How are we pushing it out to the endpoints? How are we managing the license with these endpoints for the software? And then, basic troubleshooting with your help desk, utilizing PC Anywhere for remote control, or real-time system manager for diagnostics. That's all we have for today. I appreciate you guys hanging out with us and listening to a little talk about migrating and migration strategy rather with Windows XP to Windows 7. Just a reminder, remember April 14th, 2014 is going to be the key date, a little less than 7 months. If you need help, please contact us, ITS partners, at the links shown below, as well as the phone numbers that are listed on the screen. I hope everybody enjoyed it. I hope you have a great week, and take care.